all these things that can happen to you. And we talked about marijuana, we talked about, I can't remember what else we talked about. But we're going to talk about opiates. We talked about opiates. We're going to talk about alcohol. Alcohol acts as both a stimulant and a depressant, which is kind of interesting. In the beginning, it's a stimulant. So the first drink that you take is a stimulant. After that, it becomes a stronger and stronger depressant the more you drink. The problem is, of course, it's a stimulant, and since it's a stimulant in the beginning, it shocks your system, and since it shocks your system, when it becomes a depressant, it's stronger. It's a stronger reaction. So it does a lot of damage, strangely. Well, I guess it's not that strange. But it does a lot of nerve damage, especially with prolonged use. If you drink for a long period of time, which a lot of people do, I mean, they get addicted to it, they say it's okay. The biggest liars in the world are probably people with antisocial personality disorder. The second biggest liars in the world are people who are alcoholics, because they will do anything to keep using alcohol. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll do anything they can. They will structure their families to enable them to drink. So it's, and we see that over and over again. We see individuals who are alcoholics constructing their family, forcing their family to enable them to drink. So if the father's a drinker, the mother will be an enabler, otherwise he leaves her and finds somebody that will allow him to drink. And if she's an enabler, then all of a sudden she trains the children to be enablers. So as far as this family is concerned, that is normal. That becomes normal. This is normal behavior, enabling somebody to do whatever they want to do. And they find this attractive. Where do we learn who to marry or who to be around? We learn it from our families. And that's why somebody marries somebody just like their mother, somebody marries somebody just like their father. So as it turns out, because we have this whole enabling structure in the family, this whole attempt to allow this individual to drink, when the female or the male in the family goes out to find somebody to marry, they marry somebody just like dad or just like mom, whichever the case may be. So they become an enabler and they marry an alcoholic because that seems attractive to them. That's what dad looks like. And dad was a wonderful person. Dad's always a wonderful person. So whatever dad was like, that's what they're looking for in life. Very, very odd. Or not. And we see this all the time. Sometimes you can break the cycle. Usually it's the black sheep of the family that breaks the cycle. So everybody will be an enabler in the family except the one individual. And there's always one individual. The way families work, you have somebody that identifies with mom, somebody identifies with dad, and then if there's 3 or 4 or 5 children in the family, then you've got somebody that's left out. And so if you have 3 children in the family, did any of you come from a 3-child family? You did, okay. So which one were you? Did you identify with dad, mom, or were you the black sheep?
I think I identify more with my dad.
Okay, there you go. Do you have a brother or sister that's kind of out there somewhere?
My younger brother.
Your younger brother.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, it would be the younger brother. You identify, are you the oldest in the family? Okay. Of course you identify with your father. Number 2 identifies with mom.
It sucks so bad.
Now,
I'm realizing I'm my dad. I'm like, oh.
Oh God, I start looking like my dad. And then the third one, he's the odd man out, or she's the odd man out, whichever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So, it's really kind of bizarre. We see this over and over and over again in a 3-sibling family. I know, it's kind of bizarre, isn't it? Anyway, okay. So that's good. That would be good if there were alcoholism in the family, because now we've got somebody who identifies with dad. If dad's a drinker, now if you identify with dad, you drink. There's somebody who identifies with mom. If you identify with mom, you're an enabler. And the third person, of course, has nobody to identify with. Dad's favorite child is dad's favorite child, mom's favorite child is the one that identifies with her, so you've got nobody to identify with, so you identify with your coach or with your English teacher or something. But you're a black sheep. You become a black sheep. You're different from everybody else in the family. Okay. And that's family dynamics. Areas affected by long-term use include Purkinje cells in the cerebellum, and if you've ever been around somebody that drinks a lot, unfortunately, no, it's not that unfortunate. Unfortunately, I ran into somebody at Bosch's the other day that was asking me for money. And he was older. He was an older individual. I was quite impressed that he had a cane and he could still walk. But he had some problems. You could see him jerking around, and then he couldn't walk very well. Now, there may have been another problem, but he wanted money for alcohol. Actually, he wanted a pop, and I had one in my car, so I gave him a can of pop instead of the $1.50 he wanted. Anyway, yeah, so he wasn't moving very well, and we see this with individuals that have long-term drinking problems. They have the Purkinje cells in the cerebellum start to distort and and they deteriorate. Superior frontal cortex, that's where you do your thinking. So their thinking goes down the tubes, and their movement goes down the tubes. And the last is the hippocampal pyramidal cells. Of course, that has to do with memory. So all of a sudden, their memory just goes out the window. It's really kind of fascinating to watch. Well, not that much, I guess. Anyway, this is what it looks like. This is a drinker on the left, and this is a non-drinker on the right. You can see there's a lot of activity taking place, and the reason there's so much activity taking place with the individual is because they have to concentrate on things just to make things happen. Whereas somebody else, it's more automatic. They don't have to worry about it. You can be a functional drunk. You can be able to and maybe you've seen this before, especially with military personnel. Well, not when you were in the military, but when I was in the military, we were ordered to drink. We were ordered to buy alcohol to support the NCO club or the officers club. You had to buy alcohol. In order to be an NCO, I had to join the NCO club. If I joined the NCO club, every time I went over, I had to buy 2 drinks. I had to buy 2 drinks. That was the rule. So, yeah. And I don't drink. So, when I went to the NCO club, I would buy 2 drinks and give them to somebody. But as long as I paid my money, everybody was happy. But that was the rule. I had no choice. But, so we've seen this. And you see this if somebody wants to drive. They're concentrating on driving. So they have to concentrate really, really hard, and they can do it. Their brains are relatively functional if they concentrate. But of course, if they get distracted with something, they can't see very well. They get distracted. All of a sudden, they've got a really interesting and serious problem. Alcohol works on the gamma-aminobutyric acid receptors. It's specifically the GABA receptors. Remember the GABA. God, what a mess I made up here. Sorry. Let me just throw this stuff over here. The GABA receptors. It increases postsynaptic inhibition. Remember, the GABA receptors are inhibitory. It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Euphoria when drinking may be stimulated by dopamine activation. So we're dealing with GABA, and we're also dealing with dopamine, and dopamine makes you happy. Now, I'm not a very good drinker. I've never been a very good drinker, but when I did drink, the 5 or 6 times that I drank, I got depressed. Now, what the hell's going on with me? Am I backwards? I mean, everything seems to not work on me. It works on everybody else, but it doesn't work on me. So if I drink, dopamine activation, well, evidently it goes backwards for me, and I get depressed when I drink. So you can imagine me drinking, and of course I I get depressed, so why the hell do it again? I know, this alcohol really makes me feel bad. I think I'll drink some more. Because, you know, everybody likes to feel bad, right? Isn't that the way it works? So I didn't forget my problems, and instead I really concentrated on my problems. And I got even more depressed. It activates excitatory glutamate receptors while it reduces the effects of glutamate and interferes with second messenger systems inside the neurons. And of course, this causes all kinds of interesting problems. This is one of the reasons why you become as non-functional as you do when you are drinking. Okay, so we're done with alcohol. Anxiolytics, anxiolytic just means anxiety loosening. They are medications, of course, that treat anxiety, anxiolytics. 8% of Americans suffer from anxiety. The major anxiolytics now in use are benzodiazepines and benzodiazepines. And the two major benzodiazepines are alprazolam and diazepam. Alprazolam is Xanax, and diazepam, of course, is Valium. Valium used to be the most popular drug in the world. It was the most widely used drug in the world. And then Prozac took over. And of course, now it doesn't have anything to do with, I don't know, maybe it does, I don't know. Now it's Viagra, it's the #1 drug in the world, as confusing as that is. So we were treating mental illness, and all of a sudden now we're treating erectile dysfunction, and that's the most widely used drug in the world. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. You wouldn't think there would be that many guys with erectile dysfunction. And the answer is there isn't. That's not what is going on. What's going on is, I don't know, men want a 4-hour erection or something. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Ooh, yeah. If you don't have a problem, why in the world take the drug? What happens if you take the drug and you don't have a problem? All of a sudden you have a problem. All of a sudden you created erectile dysfunction in yourself because you've used this as an artificial stimulant. And since you're doing that, now you don't have the natural stimulant. It doesn't work as well. So yeah, this is kind of whoops. Yeah. So are men really looking for a 4-hour erection? I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know. We don't talk about that kind of stuff, do we?
You think they'd be happier? I mean, have you seen any studies as far as like, with it being the #1 drug, has depressants, not depressants, but anxiety gone down? Is there any now?
No, it's increasing, still, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. The problem with Viagra is that Viagra increases the probability you'll have an erection, but it also decreases your sex drive. It just decreases your sex drive. So while it helps you as far as having an erection is concerned, it also destroys your sex drive, which I don't know, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, if you're an 18-year-old boy, there's really no reason for you to do these things. You probably have pretty close to a 4-hour erection anyway. If you're a teenage boy. I don't know. This kind of stuff doesn't make any sense. But, you know, people do what the people do, and there's no way you can control it. Benzodiazepines work by enhancing GABA receptors, increasing the effect, of course. And the more GABA receptors we have, the less anxiety you will feel. Benzodiazepines mirror the reduction of stress produced by allopregnolone, a hormone derived from progesterone. Allopregnolone binds to GABA receptors, increasing the effectiveness of GABA. And that's what benzodiazepines do. Allopregnolone, progesterone, these are female hormones. Progesterone is a female hormone. Allopregnolone is a female hormone as well. It's a precursor to progesterone. GABA in turn inhibits the release of corticotropin-releasing hormone, which triggers the stress response. Corticotropin-releasing hormone is one of the drugs, or one of the hormones that are released during a woman's period. So there is if you have too much of this stuff, If you have too much of this stuff, then you will suffer from PMS. It's one of the things that causes PMS. It's just one of the aspects of PMS. Having a hormone imbalance. And this is the hormone imbalance you're talking about. One of the things that we do with women who have PMS or women who have prolonged periods or whatever they have, if their periods aren't normal, we'll give them birth control pills because that controls all of this. It superficially controls all of these things that might potentially cause a problem. Alcohol increases the level of allopregnanolone in the brain, creating the calming effect of alcohol, and that's the reason alcohol works that way. That's why you don't get, that's why people that have been drinking, they can get violent, they can be violent, sometimes that's what it causes, but they don't have the same anxieties that they had before by increasing the allopregnanolone. I hope that's the way you do it. Okay. Stimulants are drugs that lead the brain to states of more excitation than inhibition. They have an alerting and activating effect. Some act by stimulating excitatory neurotransmitters. Some act by blocking normal inhibitory processes, as caffeine does with adenosine. So caffeine works because it blocks adenosine. Adenosine is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Because it blocks it, now all of a sudden we are more excited than we would be if we didn't drink coffee. Some people can't function until they have their first cup of coffee in the morning. Are you, I can't function until, no. You are, pretty much. Are you grouchy until you get that first cup of coffee?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it's just something I do every morning, so.
It's just something you do every morning. Okay. Do you get a headache if you don't drink your coffee?
No, I've read that though. There are people like who
yeah?
do get headaches from that, who haven't had like their first cup of coffee.
Yeah, and it's fairly quick.
Yeah.
Ooh, my head's starting to hurt. I have that problem. Lots of stimulants out there. We're going to talk about all of them. They're all a lot of fun. Nicotine, until the advent of milder cigarettes, nicotine was not widely used. If we look at smoking in the 19th century, one of the things we see is that people smoked a lot of cigars and pipes. Well, cigar and pipe tobacco is really quite strong. It's really quite toxic. So people would only pull it into their mouth and then they'd blow it back out. They couldn't pull it down into their lungs. It was just too strong. But then they invented cigarettes. Does anybody know why they invented cigarettes? Cigarettes weren't popular at all. Only sissies and women smoked cigarettes. I know. They couldn't get anybody to smoke them. Then all of a sudden something happened. And all of a sudden everybody was smoking cigarettes. World War I happened. So if you're smoking a cigar, it takes a while to smoke a cigar. The probability that a sniper is going to see the end of your cigarette or the end of your cigar is fairly high. So they stopped smoking, and pipes, of course. Pipes, you can see the smoke coming out of the pipe for an extended length of time. So in order to get your nicotine fix, people started smoking cigarettes. And you can smoke a cigarette in a couple minutes. So that's why they started smoking cigarettes. Because it took too long to smoke a pipe, it took too long to smoke cigars. Not only that, but you got a better rush out of it because you could draw it down into your lungs and then blow it back out. If you watch an old movie from the 30s or 40s, you see a lot of people drawing cigarette smoke into their lungs and blowing it out their noses. Well, you're taking it, yeah, it's getting into your system that way. If you just puff on the cigarette and don't draw it down into your lungs, you don't really get anything from it. But cigarettes, you have that capability of doing. You can draw them down into your lungs, and of course you get a bigger rush from it. The people that smoke the harsher forms of tobacco, of course, they can only draw it into their mouth and blow it back out. The problem with that is that there was a lot of mouth cancer. Freud smoked cigars almost all of his life. He had to have his bottom jaw removed. He had an artificial jaw because he had bone cancer in his jaw. I had a friend that chewed tobacco, and if you chew tobacco, it's the same game. And he he lost all of his salivary glands. He had to cut all of his salivary glands. He had to fuse his neck, the vertebrae in his neck, because he lost so many muscles. They had to tie his chin to his chest. I know that sounds horrible. And it was all because he chewed tobacco. Why did he chew tobacco? Because he was cool, that's why. He's a judge. That's how stupid he is. Anyway, nicotine activates the acetylcholine receptors known as nicotinic receptors. These receptors are found primarily in the neuromuscular junctions in the neurons of the autonomic ganglia. Nicotine works on the body by increasing heart rate, by stimulating the sympathetic nervous system, and by stimulating the release of epinephrine. So it makes you feel good. It does, it makes you feel good. It increases your epinephrine level. And that epinephrine makes you feel like you can, like there's danger out there and you need to take care of it. Okay, so nicotine really works. It's a vasoconstrictor. So people who smoke, they say, well, I'm cold, so I'm going to go out and smoke a cigarette and warm up. Well, that's the very opposite of what actually happens. If you've been around people that smoke, their hands tend to be kind of purple. Sometimes their faces get purple because, well, they're not really getting enough oxygen to their bodies. Their skin gets puffy. It collects fluid because they're constricting their blood vessels and not getting enough blood to their system, so that their face will fill up with fluid in order to replace the blood that's not there. And it doesn't take out toxins, so it's kind of an ugly thing. They don't run very well either.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
You know, somebody told me that story, and you know, I was shocked. This guy smoked and ran cross country. And he was really, really good. Evidently, he's really, really good. But, you know, that's counterintuitive.
Some of our best runners were smokers. It was funny. It was actually funny because that's, I picked it up when I was, you know, when I first joined, like my first 6 months in. Mm-hmm. And I started smoking. It's funny, and I should definitely spread this news to Marines, because in Afghanistan we were outside like, man, I gotta warm up, like, you know. it was funny, but you didn't know that was counterintuitive.
It warms up your core, but it freezes your extremities. Yeah, backwards. Where were you in Afghanistan?
The Ghamshir district, like lower by,
right.
Like right in the southern borders. That's where we're at, as like LAR, so we're more of a mobile unit.
Okay, when were you there?
2010, 2011.
Okay. My brother was there in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in charge of all the material in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So, but he left before he got there. So I'm sure he didn't supply you guys, and he wasn't supplying Marines, and he was mostly supplying the Army.
Yeah.
But of course, if they had supplies, you know, they would distribute them, especially in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of a confusing mess. I hope it wasn't as messy when you were there.
I just wanted to really well prepared.
Yeah. Nobody was really thinking about Afghanistan. They were thinking about Iraq at the time.
Yeah.
Cocaine is synthesized from the coca shrub. It grows on the lee side of the Andes Mountains. Not the ocean side, it's the other side. The side that goes down into the Amazon Valley. That's where it grows. That's where we find all the cocaine. A lot of cocaine in Colombia, a lot of cocaine, especially in Peru. That's where it started. That's where it originated, in Peru. The tribes that were living on that side of the Andes were conquered by the Inca, and the Inca used that cocaine as barter with the tribes. So they would distribute these coca leaves. They also got a lot of work out of people, because that's what cocaine does. In the natural and more diluted form, coca leaves do not produce either an extreme reaction or the possibility of addiction. Increased endurance, lower sensitivity to hunger, and a vague sense of well-being. in order to get anything out of coca leaves, you have to mix it with baking soda, with something. And what the natives used to do in the Incan Empire is chew shells, seashells. And if they chewed the seashells, then the coca would actually work. So they had to mix the coca with something in order to make it work. And they got a lot of work out of people. Of course, they worked them to death, but that's okay because at least they died happy. Gave them a vague sense of well-being. I went to Peru in 2003 on a Fulbright scholarship, Fulbright Hayes scholarship. And when we were up in the mountains, of course, they told us, well, you know, we started down in Lima, which is on the sea. We started at sea level, and they took us up, you know, 7,000 feet to Cusco. And they told us, you know, you're not going to be able to function up here because the air is so thin, and you're not used to it because you're, you know, Americans. So when we got up there, of course, everybody's going, oh, here, drink this coca tea, drink this coca tea. I'm kind of I never do what I'm told, hardly ever do what I'm told. That's why I was such a bad soldier. I always do what I think is right, which makes me even a worse soldier. But they told me to drink the tea, they told me to chew the leaves, and I didn't do it. I figured, well, you know, I'm healthy enough. I'm only 55 years old. I should be able to handle this. And I did. Everybody else, they were drinking the tea and chewing the leaves and worried about, you know, being sick up in the mountains. And I didn't have any problem. And there was another individual. He's a Lakota from, what was it? Sitting Bull. Yeah, Sitting Bull College out in North Dakota. Anyway, really nice guy. The two of us were the only ones that didn't drink the tea and didn't chew the leaves. We were the two of us, and we were the two most active people in the whole group. So we had no problems at all. I mean, it's only 7,000 feet. We're at 7,500 feet right now. Yeah, but we went up 8, 9, 10,000 feet from time to time, and we both climbed all the way to the top of the pyramids, and you know, we did all this kind of stuff. We had no problem whatsoever. He was a little faster than I was. Of course, he was half my age, so really nice guy. He was a Lakota from North Dakota. Anyway, yeah, we had a great time, and we didn't use any of this stuff. But I can understand if you're doing labor. We were just walking. We were just doing things. We weren't carrying loads or anything. And of course, the natives at that time they were moving huge rocks and whatnot. Synthesized into concentrated power crystals, such as, and that's crack, of course. The effect is much stronger if you can concentrate the cocaine, and that's what they do. They concentrate the cocaine, and they make it pure. It's just pure cocaine. As a powder, it is snorted through the nostrils for rapid lung diffusion, and thus rapid entry into the bloodstream, of course. Crack, when smoked, enters the bloodstream even faster, and crack, of course, is said to be addictive with one puff. All you need is one puff, because this is a pure substance. It's getting into your lungs, it's diffusing into your lungs, and then it's going into your brain. And it becomes almost instantly effective. One of the things that it does, yeah, and you may think, well, this doesn't make any sense. Look at all the thinking that's taking place here, and the lack of thinking that's taking place here. What happens is with a cocaine abuser, of course, when they get concentrated, everything is concentrated as far as they're concerned. So the first time you use cocaine, you can see how concentrated. There are tiny little areas where it's concentrated. After 100 days, of course, now you need a lot more cocaine in order to get this effect, and you're not getting it. So as you can see, after 100 days, now the addiction is much, much higher, and you need to consume a lot more cocaine in order to get exactly the same effect. Cocaine blocks norepinephrine receptors and allows more of the transmitter to circulate in the brain. Norepinephrine, remember, that's the one that makes you feel like you're on top of the world. It makes you feel like you can do anything. So cocaine actually makes you feel like you can defeat the world, as confusing as that is. And that's the feeling that people are looking for. Because cocaine is a vasoconstrictor, it increases the blood pressure, and it induces greater heart activity. This is okay as long as you've got a healthy heart. If you have a flaw in your heart, however, like Lynn Bias did, first time he snorted cocaine, it killed him. His heart stopped beating because he had problems. He had a problem with his heart that wasn't detectable unless he was under a great deal of stress. Well, that's exactly what cocaine does. Cocaine puts your heart in a great deal of stress. And people that have any kind of a problem with their heart, it blows their heart out. It just stops. Kills it. Kills you. It will kill you. So if you can survive the first time you use cocaine, then you're probably okay for using cocaine in the future. I know, that sounds kind of strange. This can lead to stroke of the newly initiated or the experienced user, of course, because of the degree of stress on your heart. Great deal of stress on your heart. Oddly, cocaine leads to less activity in the frontal lobe, the seat of intellectual function. As we can see from the MRIs, the functional MRIs, there's nothing going on in the front of the brain. Nothing going on. Whoops. Okay. This guy's thinking about what the hell's going on in the world. And this guy can't help it because, well, he needs a lot of cocaine in order to get to this point, of course. But this is a cocaine user. And, of course, nothing's going on in the frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex. Kind of funny.
Bruce, when they take these pictures, are these like within seconds of each other? Like the first row, second row, as far as like, or is it when or do they do it in like 5-minute increments?
They snort the cocaine while they're doing the MRI. And these are the pictures as they are snorting the cocaine. Okay. I know, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? Here, snort some cocaine and then so we can take a picture of your brain. Dude, you're all strung out anyway. Here, I'll give you some free cocaine if you let me take your picture. Because cocaine is a vasoconstrictor, we already talked about that. All right, we were already talking about that anyway. Even after stopping the use of cocaine, the brain does not return to normal metabolism for several months. And this is what I was talking about before. We talked about meth head, and any of the stimulants, of course, we have the same problem with. We've known about this for an extended length of time because we had speed. Before we had crystal meth, we had speed. We had speed before we had cocaine. Of course, cocaine's been around for a really long time, but it hasn't been abused until the 1980s. Until people started abusing cocaine, then we didn't have crystal meth because we didn't need it. We had speed. And we watched people die from as speed freaks. These individuals will accelerate their lives. They stop sleeping, and of course that really destroys their bodies. So we've been watching this for the last, 100 years or so. We've been watching people die from one of these things. And we understand that your intellectual functioning is decreased by this stimulation. The problem is you think that you're smart is the problem. So these people think that they're doing the right thing because, because they're stupid, I guess. Well, because of the cocaine. No, I'll tell you what it is. It's the norepinephrine. Remember the norepinephrine? It makes you feel like you're on top of the world. It makes you think that you'll do your homework on speed, and then you think that you did it correctly. Why? Because the norepinephrine makes you feel like that you're on top of the world, that you're the smartest person in the world. As confusing as all that is. So all we're doing is increasing the norepinephrine level, and we're giving you the idea that you're doing the proper thing. It's really kind of interesting because Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox was in, I can't remember, Growing Pains or whatever he was in. Whatever his television show was. At one point, his character was using speed. And to get all his homework. And of course, he was doing a horrible job getting his homework done. But as it turned out, that was Michael J. Fox's character. At the same time, he was snorting cocaine. And eventually, of course, Michael J. Fox ended up with Parkinson's disease, caused by the, probably caused by the cocaine that he was snorting. It's kind of interesting that his character did that, and he was actually doing it in real life. Okay, so this is okay. We can snort cocaine and make ourselves stupid. That's one thing that we can do. But what if we're snorting cocaine when we're pregnant? This was a really serious problem that we saw in the 1980s, 1990s. And unfortunately, I was working in a children's hospital in Omaha, and cocaine had just come to the area. And so all the wealthy people were snorting a lot of cocaine. And sometimes, there's people want to have sex more when they're snorting cocaine. They say that the sex is more intense. And unfortunately, of course, the wealthy people in Omaha were snorting a lot of cocaine at the time. And we were getting their babies. And the babies were a mess, were just a mess. I mean, most of them didn't survive, as sad as all that is. Children exposed to cocaine in the womb, of course, may suffer from irreversible harm to the development of the brain. It also changes the structure of things. We had babies born with their brains outside of their skulls. We had a baby born without a skull. We had a baby born with a heart on the outside, which is okay because we can fix that. But the rest of it, there's nothing you can do. I mean, we had babies with only half a brain. It was horrible. It was just the most god-awful thing you could possibly imagine, and it had to do with the fact that these people were snorting cocaine en masse while they were pregnant, because they couldn't stop, or they didn't want to stop. Of course, it makes you feel like you're really smart, but the reality is it's really stupid. And like I said, most of the babies didn't survive, so. Now that was a tragedy. I mean, if you think about it, it's a real tragedy that you can't stop. This is, it's kind of like the Zika virus. We had babies with microcephaly. It was just worse than you can possibly imagine. And it was different in everybody. That was the bizarre part. But we didn't see that. We only saw that with cocaine. We didn't see that with marijuana. We didn't see that with alcohol. We saw it to some extent with alcohol, with FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome. But oh, it was horrible. Just horrible. The wealthiest person in Omaha, which wasn't whatever his name is, the guy that's the wealthiest person now wasn't the wealthiest person back then. It was a guy that owned Godfather's Pizza. You've never heard of Godfather's, so you have heard of Godfather. I don't like their pizza. They use too much oregano in their sauce or something. I don't know. Anyway, he was a billionaire, and he had a trophy wife. It was a mess. And his wife would come in, oh, she's all jittery because she's on cocaine, but of course the baby's dying. There's nothing you can do, and she comes in, to hold the baby, and she's got the shakes. Oh, it was a mess, just a mess. Anyway, okay. Cocaine seems to interfere with the ability to focus attention and with some intellectual functions, and this is a really serious problem. Amphetamines and methamphetamines have a similar structure to that of the catecholamine transmitter epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So it makes you feel like you're on top of the world. It gives you a real boost because of the epinephrine, and it makes you feel happy. So why the hell doesn't everybody use this stuff? I mean, it makes you feel good, makes you feel like you're smart, and it gives you energy. So why wouldn't everybody use amphetamines? The amphetamines cause the release of these transmitters from the synaptic vesicles without a nerve impulse. So you have excess epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. It's like you're ready for something to happen, and you're feeling good about yourself. After the release of the transmitter, the amphetamines enhance the activity by blocking the reuptake of endogenous transmitter, competing with the endogenous transmitters for the enzyme that inactivates them. And this is the reason that there's so much of this juice in your brain: epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So because of that, we've got all all these extra neurotransmitters floating around, all these endogenous transmitters: epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Thus going the wrong direction. The amphetamines prolong the presence of the endogenous transmitters in the synaptic cleft. So it's natural, and people have argued that. Oh, it's natural because these are all natural neurotransmitters. And all it's doing is inducing your brain to have more of this stuff in your synaptic clefts. So it's natural. No, it's not. Amphetamines on the short term, the short-term effect of amphetamines, it heightens the alertness in the state to a state of euphoria. It wards off boredom. It promotes sustained effort with little rest and lowered fatigue. However, quality of work is not enhanced, of course, even though you think it is, because of the norepinephrine, making you think you're smartest person in the world. It increases motivation, but not cognitive ability. So you're more motivated to do things, but it doesn't increase your intelligence. Amphetamines affect the autonomic nervous system by producing high blood pressure. It produces tremors, it produces dizziness, it produces sweating, rapid breathing, and nausea. Now this can be a problem. If prolonged use will make these tremors permanent. They'll also make the dizziness permanent to some extent, but especially the tremors, which makes you a very interesting person. You get these strange jerks that you can't control. They look like tics, but they're not. It's induced by the amphetamines. Especially methamphetamine will do this. Amphetamine long-term use, tolerance level, progressive loss of effectiveness of the drug, so you have to use more and more and more and more. Of course, the more you use, the more damage you do. This may, of course, cause excitotoxicity, where now, all of a sudden, these things are non-functional anymore. Remember, your body's trying to protect itself. The entire time you're taking all these stupid drugs, your body's trying to protect itself, and it will protect itself by down-regulating the number of receptor sites for all of these things. So it down-regulates, and that's where tolerance comes from. Your body is trying to protect itself. Now, if you were in tune with your body would tell you, stop taking that stupid stuff, you idiot, and you would stop taking that stupid stuff because you're not an idiot. But of course, you think that you're stimulating yourself, and you're doing yourself no harm whatsoever. People that use amphetamines or cocaine or methamphetamines for a prolonged period of time do not sleep. And they cause themselves insomnia, a form of insomnia. It will cause severe weight loss, because one of the things that you need to do is you need to repair your body. But your body's not repairing itself anymore because you're not sleeping. And if you're not sleeping, it's not repairing your body. And so you're burning all of this energy, and you're burning all the fuel that you put into your system. It also takes away your hunger, so you're not eating as much as you were before. So it's a really wonderful way to lose weight really, really fast. It's also a really stupid way to lose weight really, really fast, because you're destroying your body at the same time. Severe weight loss. General deterioration of the mental and physical condition. And if you've ever been around one of these individuals, they're not real bright. Whoever they were before, they're not real bright anymore. Once upon a time, I taught high school back in 1983-84 at a high school called Platteview in Springfield, Nebraska. I taught high school. And there were families that were really bright. And one of the families that was really bright, he was the president of the senior class. His sister was president of the junior class. They were both, he was the band leader. He was the president of the Senate, the high school Senate. Brilliant guy. I took him to we went to Gustavus Adolphus College for some kind of a symposium of leadership. And he was one of the leading guys there. He was out on the dais. Of course, I was back of the room, not doing anything. But this guy was a real go-getter. He was a real leader until he got to college, and then he's dead. He's my high school student. He died at, I don't know, 32 or 33. He methed himself to death. He died of old age. He's dead. And his sister is dead. She did exactly the same thing. One of the smartest families, they had IQs, astronomical IQs. They were just fabulous people. Leaders, they were smart, they were together, but you know, they went to college and started using drugs because the school was so competitive. They felt like they needed to. And maybe they were using, I don't know, something, Adderall or something. Maybe they were using something before they went away to college. But anyway, they're dead. Sorry about that. I didn't kill them. If they'd asked me, I would have told them not to do it. I would have told them this. So you can't compete at Yale and Harvard. So what? Who cares? Go to Nebraska, University of Nebraska. Go to Kearney. Go anywhere. You don't have to be the smartest person in the United States. Of course, they eventually became the deadest person in the United States. Once you're dead, I guess. Extreme use may lead to symptoms similar to those of paranoid schizophrenia, which is always fun. Paranoid schizophrenics are just a blast. If you've ever been around somebody who's scared and makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. They tend to be compulsive, with agitated behavior, irrational suspiciousness, of course. Observation of those who use chronically shows symptoms of brain damage, and is very similar to Muhammad Ali, the center of his brain going away. That's exactly what happens with these guys. As much fun as that is. They also lose their teeth. Their teeth rot out because it's crystal meth or amphetamines or whatever they're using, the speed actually makes their mouth more acidic, and it just eats their teeth away, which is quite attractive. They turn black, which is a very attractive color to have in your mouth. All right, I'll stop picking on these guys. Once upon a time, I don't know if I should tell you this. Once upon a time, my first wife left me. She left me and she started working at a truck stop as a waitress. And that was her primary job. Her secondary job was pushing speed to the truck drivers. Unfortunately, of course, the police got, they found out what was going on, and they induced her to tell them who was supplying her with speed. And instead of dropping a dime on her supplier, she jumped on a bus and came back to me, unfortunately. She was actually running away from the cops. But of course, she came back, and unfortunately, I'm an idiot. I'm not the smartest person in the world. So I let her come back, as dumb as that is. Why did I let her come back? Well, she had 2 kids, and I was taking care of them. And it was a lot easier when she was there. But of course, I don't know, all kinds of horrible things happened after that. But eventually I got rid of her again. Thank God. I'm talking to her. Oh, my God. She went to, I was in Lubbock, Texas. I was stationed in Texas. Of course, she comes down with she had a baggie full of black and green crosses, speed, and a baggie full of marijuana. And she said, of course, I'm going to get in trouble if they catch me with any of this stuff. So I threw it in the dumpster. She said, oh, you just threw away, $1,500 worth of drugs. Like, I gave her crap. God. How stupid would I be to keep that stuff, right? Jiminy Christmas. Her suitcase didn't have anything in it but drugs. A baggie full of marijuana and a baggie with a trash bag full of marijuana. It was horrible. Anyway, hallucinogens alter sensory perception. Hallucinogens include LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin. The hallucinogens are often visual in effect, which is always a lot of fun. Okay. LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, creates its amazing effects by acting on select serotonin receptors, but researchers are not sure exactly why. Lysergic acid diethylamide turns out it's a natural substance. It is produced by a fungus, barley rust. I don't know if you guys don't know anything about wheat. Sometimes the wheat will get this brown stuff on it, and it's fungus. It's a fungus. Usually what you'll do is you'll go ahead and harvest the wheat or the barley or the oats or whatever it is. And then they wash it. They'll have to wash it to get all that stuff off of there. Anyway, lysergic acid diethylmide, it's a natural substance. Why do we have LSD and why can chemists make it fairly simply? Because they isolated that barley rust and they were able to figure out what the chemical structure was. And now, of course, that's LSD. It's not a really serious problem now, but it was a really horrible problem back in the 60s and 70s. People started dropping acid back then. And of course, it changed a lot of things that happened in the United States. You know, this, you can't equate what was going on historically unless you understand that there was this undercurrent of psychedelic music, psychedelic art, psychedelic stuff, and it all came from LSD. So they were smoking pot, not that much, and the pot wasn't very strong. They were dropping speed because they were using that to fuel their, what was going on, the hippies and all those guys. And then they were dropping acid, LSD. And it changed the United States to some extent. I know I was there. Of course, I was in the military at the time, and my job was collecting urine from people to find out if they were. Actually, we couldn't detect this stuff. We couldn't detect marijuana either, but we could detect speed. We could detect barbiturates, amphetamines, and opiates. So that's what we were looking for. But that was my job, so I was a narc.
Is this the stuff that they have to draw from the spinal fluid or something like that in order to detect it, right?
Yeah. It's such a minuscule amount that there's just nothing we can do. We can't detect it any other way than drawing the spinal fluid in order to detect it. Marijuana you can't overdose on. You can smoke all the pot in the world, it's not going to kill you. Amphetamines you can take too much. Opiates, of course, you can take too much. LSD, if you could drink a gallon of, we could fill up your 16.9 ounce bottle with LSD, and you could drink it, and it wouldn't kill you. You can't overdose on LSD. You only have one reaction, and if you take a tiny little bit, you'll get that reaction. If you take more, you get exactly the same reaction. It may be prolonged, and that's the only difference. So you can't overdose on LSD, you can't overdose on marijuana. What's happening here? Structure of LSD resembles that of serotonin, and that's why it works, because it looks like serotonin. Yeah, and you can use a tiny, tiny little bit, and it's hardly detectable, and you can have an extreme reaction from it. So it's kind of fun. PCP is a lot of fun as well. Unicycular Dean. It was developed as an analgesic and anesthesia, but it created such agitated side effects that its use on humans was stopped. We started only using it with animals. Because who cares what animals are thinking? And of course, they can't tell us what the side effects are anyway. Its effects became known on the street, and abuse of the drug followed. They started stealing it from veterinary clinics because they were using it on horses, they were using it on large animals. PCP can become fairly toxic quickly, with low doses causing combativeness and catatonia. Now the interesting thing about PCP is that it makes you numb, and that's what catatonia is all about. So you don't feel anything. And this is one of the problems that the police are having. If somebody has used PCP, the person is not only, you can't stop them because they're combative. So they want to fight you. And the other thing is they don't feel any pain. So you can hit them. And I've seen pictures of film, video of people on PCP. There's nothing you can do except kill them. That's it. And that's one of the reasons why people are having problems with the police, because the police don't know if you're on PCP or not. So if they hit you and knock you out, and your body is functioning without any lucidity to it, but you're still moving, You blacked out, they think you're on PCP. And the only way you can stop somebody on PCP is to kill, literally to kill them. You can cut their arm off. You know, it's kind of like that movie where the guy's fighting the rabbit and he bites his leg off. He gets both of his arms, bites both of his arms off, then he tries to kick the rabbit, and then the rabbit chews both. Come on, I'll still fight you. And that's the way it is with PCP. It's exactly the same way. They will not stop. You literally have to kill them.
There was a spike when I was in Iraq like that, where they shooting the guy and he just would not go down.
Would not go down.
He would not go down. I shot in the leg like 2 or 3 times, and he was just still dragging his leg along.
There you go.
It was crazy. I was like, wow, this is. And later to find out that there was a huge spike in in them using PCP and another drug. I can't remember what it was, but it was pretty
intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To see.
It's scary. It's scary because there's nothing you can do. It's like a video game.
It's like like a movie. It was
exactly.
Really, it's unreal. I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy.
It's nuts. Anyway, that's PCP, fun stuff. Unicycular Dean can be found in a powder form, dissolved in water, as a pill, or as a dark gummy substance. It's usually smoked by placing it on marijuana or another leafy substance. You can put it in a cigarette. Usually it's just put on marijuana and then smoked with marijuana, which seems stupid to me. Why are they doing all this stuff? The person is not lucid. They've lost complete control of their brains. So why would you do that? It's like blacking out, and you don't know what you're doing for the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. Why would you do that? PCP antagonizes the NMDA receptor and stimulates the release of the transmitter dopamine. Research shows that possibly PCP acts on the prefrontal cortex and produces transient psychosis. Research with animals also shows a degeneration of the hippocampus and cingulate gyrus. But we haven't really seen this in people because normally they don't survive. So we don't know. A lot of people don't. You can't take this stuff over and over and over and over again. You wouldn't want to because you black out. So why would you continue to do this? It just doesn't make any sense. But if we give it to animals over an extended length of time, it destroys their memory, which is always fun, and their cingulate gyrus. And cingulate gyrus has to do with body control. So that's kind of stupid. One of the newest street drugs is the hallucinogen and European rave drug, ecstasy, or MDMA. The drug is a combination of amphetamine and hallucinogen and affects the serotonin-producing neurons in the brain. Okay. What was I watching? Something Ted and Bob need wedding dates or something. And she gives the lady... Yeah, okay. Anyway. They take off all their clothes, which normally doesn't happen. I mean, so you think ecstasy is a big orgy. All these people have all this serotonin flooding around in their brain, so they're taking their clothes off and whatnot. Well, that's not normally what happens. What normally happens is they just become real affectionate to the extent that they want to hug everybody. And they also salivate like crazy. So they suck on a pacifier. So if you're on ecstasy, you're drooling and okay. So everybody wants to hug a drooler, right? That's the rave drug. Yeah. So repetitive music is one of the things that they crave. So if you've ever been around, I don't know, this type of music, it's very repetitive. It's very loud. Has a strong bass. MDMA or ecstasy, while it has a calming effect during its use, it may actually be creating a state of excitotoxicity if used very frequently. Animal studies have shown marked decreases in serotonin axons after use. This may affect mood and memory, of course. So as long as you're taking this stuff, you're really, really happy. But when you're not taking this stuff, you've destroyed the serotonin-producing axons in your brain, or the area, the raphe nuclei, so you can't be happy anymore. So you're really happy while you're on it, but you're destroying that portion of your brain that produces the serotonin. So now you're not happy. You can't be happy anymore. So if you've ever been around people that rave, they're kind of grouchy. Unless they're raving, because, well, they don't have as much serotonin as everybody else does. It's really kind of fascinating. Or not. Why would you do this? I want to be really happy tonight, but the rest of my life I'm not going to be happy at all. Let's do this. Wait a minute, so what are you going to have to do in the future to be happy? Is there anything that you can do to stimulate that portion of your brain so that you can be happy again? I know, let's get drunk. That might work. Jeez, this is so stupid. Addiction to nicotine, alcohol, and drugs injures the community by running up medical expenses and causing people to die prematurely. Substance abusers commit crimes and cause traffic accidents, and of course we're not exactly sure how many more traffic accidents are being caused by marijuana in Colorado and Oregon and California. Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, all those states that have legalized marijuana. But we think there must be more, okay, because that's what marijuana does. It distorts time, it distorts movement. So you really should, if you're smoking pot, you really should sit down and don't move, because you may trip on something. If you try to drive your car, you drive really slow. When I was in the military, one night I was called out. It was during the day, actually. So I jumped in my car. It was a fragile diabetic, and so they called me out. And normally when they called the lab out, they also called out radiology. So I jumped in my car, threw my 2 kids in the car, and I took off, driving at 50 miles an hour through base housing, of course, trying to go speed limit. And just as I got to a corner, the radiology tech pulled up. And wow, he was going like 5 miles an hour. I could have walked faster than he was driving. I got behind him and I still had like half a mile to go. And here we're just creeping along. My car could barely go that slow. It was nuts. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Of course, they just called me out and it was taking forever to get to the hospital. So I got there and oh my God, the doctor was so pissed. And he's screaming at me, like, where have you been? You're supposed to be on call. Why didn't you get here? I didn't say anything. Drew the blood, went back. The guy almost died, and it was because of me. I mean, normally I save people's lives. I don't kill people. So I went to the radiology tech, who they called him out for something else, and I said, "What the hell's wrong with you? Are you high?" And about that time, I looked at his eyes, and they were bloodshot. He was smoking dope. He thought he was driving 20, 25 miles an hour. He was driving 5 miles an hour. And he got all pissed off about it, because he thought I was going to turn him in. I didn't. Of course, he was our quarterback. Look at him. He was a power forward on the basketball team and our quarterback. I'm not going to turn him in. Anyway, he put out a hit on me because he thought I was going to turn him in. So here I'm ducking. I mean, I've got people trying to kill me. I mean, it was really kind of strange. Nobody killed me. Obviously, nobody killed me. And he eventually called off the hit. So how much am I worth? To kill me, how much does it cost? It was only like $500. And I didn't turn him in, of course. It didn't have anything to do with the hit. It had to do with him being power forward on the basketball team. Anyway, okay. The cost of helping addicts control their addiction and that of controlling trafficking is very high. Babies born to women using addictive substances impairs brain growth. Just about everything can really mess up a baby. Anything can mess up a baby. We need that baby to develop normally. And of course, drugs don't allow that to happen. 20% of all deaths in the United States every year are related to smoking. 100,000 of these are due to lung cancer. Of people over the age of 55, smoking doubles the probability of dementia, especially Alzheimer's disease. So that's something to think about if you are a smoker, which you're not anymore, so we're okay. About 125,000 deaths a year associated with alcohol, many resulting from accidents and drunk driving, of course. A lot of it has to do with other people dying. I had an aunt. Was she my aunt? No, she's my great aunt, I'm sorry. She had her grandson with her in a car. She pulled up at a four-way stop, and there was a car coming toward her, but of course it was a four-way stop. So she pulled out into the road, and he didn't slow down at all. He just plowed right into her. Killed her grandson. The guy was drunk. She died, he died, the baby died. Well, he wasn't a baby, he was like 7. But the drunk didn't get hurt at all. So, and of course somebody called an ambulance, and the ambulance came out, and you know, this guy's passed out in his car. And my aunt's dead, and who's my cousin, I guess, my third cousin or something, he's dead, you know, so. But they were afraid that he had died, so they rushed him back to the hospital. He didn't have the first injury. Lost his license for 6 months. Vehicular homicide. 2 counts of vehicular homicide. Lost his license for 2 months. Anyway, this is a long time ago. Don't worry about it. Not that big a deal. 20,000 deaths a year caused by illegal drugs. 8,000 more deaths are caused by drug-associated AIDS. 183,000 people have died from opioid overdoses from 1999 through 2015. Most of those were in New Hampshire and in West Virginia. Some very intelligent person decided that he was going to cut heroin with elephant tranquilizer. You may have remember this. This was about a year ago. They had 78 overdoses in 48 hours on this stuff. It was a lot stronger than it normally is. Yeah, it was kind of bizarre. Who does that? Well, that's the kind of stuff that causes people to overdose. Elephant tranquilizer. Scientists have been looking for cures of addiction for centuries. Many times treatments have been far more destructive than the addictions themselves. For example, physicians in the 19th century treated alcohol addiction with laudanum. And laudanum, of course, is tincture of opium. Anything that is tincture means that it's dissolved in alcohol. So they take opium and they dissolve it in alcohol, and that's supposed to be a cure for alcoholism. Edgar Allan Poe he was an alcoholic, and he was fairly fragile. He was very, very sensitive to alcohol. So if he drank, he got really, really drunk. And so they tried to wean him off of alcohol with laudanum. If you've ever watched Tombstone, or any of those movies about the OK Corral, the girlfriend of Wyatt Earp, not the Jewish actress lady, but his girlfriend before he ran off with the Jewish actress, was on laudanum, and she used it all the time. And that's one of the reasons why he left her. Coca-Cola was used as an alcohol substitute until the cocaine in the beverage was changed to a less addictive caffeine. It still tastes like cocaine, however, because they put the essence of cocaine in the Coca-Cola, and that's the secret ingredient. That's why Coke tastes different than Pepsi or RC Cola or whatever. You can drink another cola and it doesn't have the same bite that Coca-Cola has, and it's because of the cocaine. It still tastes like cocaine. I know. They use coca oil, which it doesn't have the stimulant in it. Since each drug has different effects on the nervous system, it is tricky creating a single model of addiction, but that hasn't stopped anyone from trying, of course. The moral model was the old model. That's the religious model. They blamed people for their own drug use as a lack of moral character. This model was based on an individual's need to ask for divine intervention to throw off the addiction. And that's the way it was. And that still is the way it is with some people that are religious or are very religious. They feel like it's a moral failure of the individual. The disease model is very popular. It's very popular today. AA uses the disease model. Not responding to the moralists that pointed their fingers at the addiction sufferers, the disease model sees addiction as an affliction that the individual acquires and which requires treatment to cure. It's just like a disease. The disease model has a large number of adherents because it does not deal with guilt and weaknesses as the moral model did, but sees the addiction as a chronic problem. They see it as a disease. And the question is alcoholism a disease? There is a problem with, well, it is, and there is a problem with this model. This model is, if you catch the flu, whose fault is it? Is it you or is it the flu bug? Is it a failing of yours or is it a failing of, or is it?
I think the failing of you. I mean,
well, you didn't stay healthy, I guess. But I mean, you can be the healthiest person in the world and still get hantavirus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you can be the healthiest person in the world. That's not right. So is it really a disease? It affects whole areas of people. Is it a disease? You were talking about this the other day. I remember because I was quite impressed that you agreed with me in that, and of course, we've never had this conversation before. Mm-hmm. The disease model is the model that is followed by the Alcoholics Anonymous. And the idea is it's not your fault. And that's the problem, because you don't take responsibility for your actions. That's the problem that I see, personally. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up. Next time we'll talk about all the other models. There's only a couple more left. But I see it as a lifestyle problem, mm-hmm. especially on reservations. Because, I mean, you do it because your friends do it, and everybody follows everybody else.
Yeah.
So it becomes a lifestyle with you. So in order to break that habit, what you have to do is you have to leave the lifestyle. You have to stay away from your friends that drink. It's the only way that it works. Anyway.
Do you have a signing sheet for today?